recently received the following email from a constituent of mine in Calgary, Lougheed. Michael wrote the following, quotes, "I have not had a full-time job in over 2 years. I have a wife and kids, no health or dental coverage, no cash left, and zero RRSP or pension funds, as I've had to drain this out just to survive. I can't compete for roles in my professional field of project controls, as there is no capital investment at all and zero opportunity to change career paths when hundreds of people with experience apply to every position. Over half of our people are broke and looking at poverty and economic ruin in the new normal," unquote. That is the reality being lived today by tens and tens of thousands of Albertans and other Canadians across the country. That is a reality that yesterday's throne speech and address from the Prime Minister completely failed to recognize, to acknowledge, or to act on. Yesterday's throne speech included 6,783 words. Not one of them was about the largest industry sector in the Canadian economy. Not one of them mentioned our oil and gas sector, which helped to pull Canada through the last global recession. Not one word recognizing the crisis in that sector and in energy-producing provinces like Alberta. Not one word about fairness in the Federation, about Western alienation, about creating real jobs right now as the central focus of governments across Canada. Last week, I was in Ottawa with premiers representing a consensus of all 13 provinces and territories, calling on the federal government in the throne speech to focus on two key priorities, on health and the economy and jobs. We also asked for action to show fairness in the Federation through reform of the Fiscal Stabilization Program. These issues were not addressed in yesterday's throne speech. There was space for every bright, shiny object, every possible political distraction. Kooky academic theories like intersectionality found their way into yesterday's throne speech, but not one word about health transfers for the provinces that are carrying 80% of the costs as our population ages and we cope with a pandemic. Yesterday's throne speech presented endless policies that would actually further hammer the largest sector of the Canadian economy, like the clean fuel standards. No recognition that what the federal government must do at this point is first to do no harm. All we are asking of the Government of Canada is to let this province and our resource industries to get off their knees, to get back onto our feet during this, the largest economic contraction since the Great Depression. Yesterday's speech reflected a total lack of understanding about the economic crisis through which we are living as a country. It was a fantasy plan for a mythical country that only exists apparently in the minds of Ottawa Liberals and like-minded Laurentian elites, that forgets about the regions and the resource workers who have been the motor of Canadian prosperity in recent decades. The oil and gas industry, the largest export industry of the Canadian economy, typically exporting $100 billion of value every year. We're never going to export $100 billion or a fraction of that in wind and solar generated electricity. This is the largest export industry that is critical to our balance of payment, to our national wealth. It generates 20% of the Government of Canada's revenues. It employs 500,000 Canadians. The energy industry more broadly it supports 800,000 jobs directly and indirectly. And all we saw yesterday was a repetition of a litany of policies that would further damage that industry at a time of critical need. Let us remember that the Canadian energy sector has been the great engine of social mobility in this country during a time of economic change in recent decades, when many workers in other parts of the country who didn't have the benefit of post-secondary education but had good jobs lost those jobs in the traditional manufacturing sector, in the East Coast fishery, in the BC forestry, and in other industries, and tens, hundreds of thousands of them moved to Alberta for opportunity over the past 4 decades, making good incomes, being able to take care of their families, and in many cases, being able to start new businesses and enjoy the thrill of opportunity. It is important that we remember, during the global financial crisis in 2007, 8, and 9, the last major global economic downturn, the Canadian energy sector pulled this country through that crisis with less damage than any other major developed economy. And it was in part thanks to the generous transfers emanated by the responsible development of our resources here that we have not only been able to support the economy of other parts of the country, but also the social programs, the healthcare, the infrastructure, and education, with a net fiscal contribution of over $630 billion coming from Albertans through their federal taxes since 1960, and even in recent tough years, an average net annual fiscal contribution of $20 billion a year. A strong Canada needs a strong Alberta, and Alberta was not recognized in yesterday's throne speech with the one passing reference about effectively phasing out the energy sector.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney reacting to the throne speech. Kenney saying it was a complete failure for a number of different reasons, not the least of which was it did not mention the oil and gas sector.